Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by a couple DodgerBlue.com folks, Blake Williams, Scott Geirman. Guys, thanks for joining us. Blake, you've got the WBC hat on. I felt bad that we were scheduling this in the middle of USA Mexico, but you're welcome is now what I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, it's a good way to get our mind off that game. It's not going too well for USA, but I'm sure there's a lot of Mexico fans enjoying it.
I saw that there's a guy from Mexico who has 2 home runs in this game. He had 2 home runs all of last season as like a 32-year-old at AA or something like that. So things going well for Team USA. Scott, down there, how you doing?
Doing all right. How are you guys?
Good, man. Well, it's good to be together. Shout out to the people joining us live on YouTube, joining us live on Facebook. We appreciate you. Those watching or listening after the fact, whether on YouTube or part of our podcast, we appreciate you all as well. We got a big show tonight. It's crazy to think. I mean, we're sitting here on, the 12th. So we're 18 days away from opening day, which is an exciting place to be. We've got lots to talk about for the Dodgers. We've got some injury updates. We've got some prospect roster updates. We got Clayton Kershaw making a spring debut. We could talk a little bit about rule changes and that kind of thing. But let's start with what I think is the biggest story going on in the Dodgers camp right now, and that's Tony Gonsolin's injury. If you haven't been following this past week, Tony Gonsolin sprains his ankle walking across the field during infield drills. I'm not quite sure how that happens. He sprains it. Originally, it sounded like they weren't overly concerned. As time has gone on, they have gotten more and more concerns. He was on crutches at one point. But Dave Roberts has basically said, this is going to be something that it's going to take a while. This is going to move slowly. The anticipation, Scott, is that he won't be ready for opening day as the number 4 or 5 starter. He obviously wasn't going to pitch opening day, but it sounds like he's going to miss a start or two. And so how are you feeling as a Dodger fan when you hear that? I mean, Gonsolin was really good. He's one of the 5 starting pitchers. Is this a game-changing injury for the Dodgers?
Yes and no on a few fronts. I feel like that he was unbelievable last year. Tony Gonsolin getting hurt was without a doubt a blow. I'm not going to act like it's not a negative. It's a huge negative. You can benefit from all the depth that you can have, and Tony Gonsolin's absence, albeit he's going to miss some time. He didn't get very much. He won't have much ramp up into the season, so we might not see him for a few months, honestly, till he's fully stretched out. So, but I do like what we've seen from a number of Dodger starters. So, I think they're equipped to weather it just for a bit. But there's been a lot of guys with a lot of upside, like Michael Grove, and I know we're going to talk about him coming up.
Yeah, we'll get to that, Blake. I would push back to Scott's a few months thing. I mean, I feel like he maybe misses 2, maybe 3 starts in the regular season. Is that kind of where do you stand on how much time you're sort of, as you read between the lines of Dave Roberts' comments?
Yeah, I don't see him missing a few months, maybe a month. But yeah,
it's not what I said. I said he's gonna miss till he's stretched out. Oh,
that's it'll be a few months till he's stretched out. So
yes,
back sooner, but not full.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Okay, that's more fair. That's kind of how I see it too, I guess. He'll miss a few starts. He'll be working his way back up early in the season, but yeah, it's concerning because they're already getting into their depth, and we've talked about them not having great depth to begin with. Yeah. They have some promising young pitchers that should be able to help out, but you still don't really know what you're getting there. And anytime you lose a valuable member of your rotation, it's going to hurt, even if you have good replacements.
Yeah, and Blake, just while we stay on Gonsolin for a second here, this is a guy who's had injury issues before. He and Dustin May have both struggled to stay healthy. I think the good news here is that we're not talking about an arm injury. This feels obviously like a total fluke, but does this fall into the bucket of complete random coincidence as far as you're concerned? Or at some point, if every part of a guy's body ends up getting injured in his first 3 or 4 years in the majors, does that become an issue?
Well, we talked about it on the last show. We did pitcher's break. It's just something that happens. It was kind of a fluke injury for Gonsolin. Like, it's not his arm or his back. Yeah. Like, he just twisted his ankle, and you can't really predict that. And I don't think it's going to be an issue going forward. It's just things that happen, and you can't really control it.
Yeah. So one of the things, and you guys have kind of mentioned this, when it comes to losing a guy like Gonsolin, obviously when you lose any of your 5 starting pitchers, that's a problem. Last year, the Dodgers entered the season with 6 starting pitchers, so you could feel a little bit better about missing one of them. This year, they just have 5 plus a bunch of young guys. And yet, the more I've thought about this, Scott, and I'm curious if you agree with me, the Gavin Lux injury was one of what happened at a position where, yes, Miguel Rojas exists as a person capable of playing shortstop, but it happened at a position where there seemed to be non-existent depth behind him. It opened up a massive hole that the Dodgers were sort of hoping wasn't going to be opened up. I actually think from a starting pitching perspective, obviously they would be crushed if Julio were to miss time or if Kershaw were to miss time. But a guy like Gonsolin, I'm not saying that the guys behind him are just as good, but do you agree with me, Scott, that the Dodgers are actually far more prepared to handle an injury like Gonsolin's than they would be in a situation like the Gavin Lux situation?
Oh, 100%, without a doubt. Yeah. Like, just like we spoke about a few weeks ago when we were in Arizona, the floor for the replacements at shortstop is much lower than the floor for replacement starting pitchers. The Dodgers have always, in the Andrew Friedman era, have been able to, find really solid and or above average production from, plug and play starters. There hasn't really been a time where they've just needed someone off the scrap heap, and they've needed to do that. Have had guys who have come up, made a major league debut. They maybe struggled a bit, but then they've kind of found their footing. But they'll always put people with upside in there instead of just they're innings eaters, but they're productive. But the floor for the shortstops, it can get pretty murky there. You saw with the Angels last year when they lost David Fletcher, they had to dive all the way into the deep in the minor leagues, and it got pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, look, Miguel Rojas is a name we're familiar with. Has he had really competent seasons at the major league level? Yes. I was looking up weighted runs created plus a couple of weeks ago. He had the 3rd worst weighted runs created plus in all of Major League Baseball among qualified hitters. So that was just last year. We're not talking about like 4 years ago. Of course, the year before he was much better. So he's going to give you something defensively. This isn't a crap on Miguel Rojas segment here, but Blake, just quickly, do you agree with the sentiment that they are more prepared to replace one of their 5 starting pitchers than they were to replace their starting shortstop?
If you asked me earlier in the season, I would have said no, but then Friedman was talking about how after the Lux injury, they said they didn't feel very confident basically in their depth in the infield and just the position side of things. And I think the young pitchers have impressed a lot in spring training. I know you shouldn't put a lot of stock into that, but it's still encouraging to see, like, you have Michael Grove hitting 97 and showing off a nice curveball. So I just think there's more confidence in there with those guys.
Yeah.
And with what Friedman was saying, like, they just feel less good about their positional group now.
Yeah. So let's get into the replacement. There's obviously a large group of pitching prospects that we expect to see at some point this year. We've mentioned Michael Grove. We've mentioned Ryan Pepio, both guys who have already made major league debuts last season. They've also got Bobby Miller, who's the organization's top pitching prospect. They've got Gavin Stone, who's the organization's number 2 pitching prospect. They've got guys like Nick Nastrini who are in camp. So they've got a plethora of options as far as guys we expect to see. And yet, knowing that we're not talking about after the All-Star break, we're talking about on opening day and the beginning of the season, Dave Roberts has basically said it's down to 2 of those guys, and that's Ryan Pepio and that's Michael Grove. Now, Ryan Pepio is the number 6 prospect in the organization, according to MLB Pipeline. Michael Grove is the number 24 prospect, according to MLB Pipeline. And both of these guys have really had fantastic springs thus far. Both pitched in the majors last year. Neither of them showed you something that makes you believe they're going to be necessarily future all-stars, but they were competent at the major league level. I was joking with Michael Grove when he was on our show and saying, the ERA may not have looked great, Michael, but the expected ERA, was a positive one. And he just joked his sample size, and Pepio struggled with walks and control. And yet, there were moments that were really positive for him. But you hinted at it, Blake. Both of these guys this spring have been really, really good. 3 starts apiece. They pitched 1 inning, they pitched 2 innings, and then they pitched 3 innings. And I've got the numbers up on the screen if you're watching. Pepio, 6 total innings, 7 hits, 1 earned run, 1 walk, 9 strikeouts. So a guy who struggled with control has a 9-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio in 6 innings. That's encouraging. On the other hand, Michael Grove, 6 innings, 2 hits, 1 earned, no walks, 5 strikeouts. And the 1 hit and 1 earned run were in his first start. So the last 5 innings for Michael Grove, 1 hit, no earned runs, no walks, and 4 of those strikeouts. And so both of these guys have been good. And Scott, I'll come to you first. What's interesting here is that Pepiot is clearly the name who has been on top 100 lists. Michael Grove has never been on a top 100 list. Now, he was a high draft pick. He was a guy that came in with some pedigree, but he battled injuries, battled control stuff, and kind of in the last 18 months has changed the way he pitches and all sorts of things, and has established himself as the first guy Andrew Friedman ever called up from Double-A straight into the major leagues. That's Michael Grove. And then you've got Pepiot again, who's been a top 100 prospect. So Scott, give me, just as you've seen limited sample size this spring, maybe a little bit from last year, maybe give me how you're feeling about both Pepiot and Grove.
Well, I think, Michael Grove has kind of pitching like he has something to prove a little bit. He's kind of taking a next step. You can clearly see that. That's what you'd like to see out of all your, pitching prospects that are kind of on the fringe, ready to go, and just looking for a chance. He looks like he's ready to take that step, and he's certainly showing it. But I'd temper expectations just a slight bit. Spring training, of course, but what the results you've seen, just like Blake mentioned, his stuff's playing up, and he has this, and you kind of parlay that into the regular season. So when he's ready, if he's the guy, I think both of them will get their shot. It's not like one's going to do it and it just shuts the door on the other. Pitchers break. I'm going to use that all year, Blake. I love it. But I think that they're both ready to go. But Ryan Pepiot certainly, for me, has looked exceptional. We spoke with him in the clubhouse, and he just has a different type of mindset for a young player that you generally you love to see. Yeah. And I think for me, Ryan Pepiot, I think that's the guy that they'll ultimately go with. And, we really could see both.
Yeah. Blake, I'm biased because both of these guys have been on the show. Both of these guys are incredibly nice people. Ryan Pepiot, as you said, he came on last year. And then also we got to chat with him in the clubhouse. Michael Grove has come on once every year for the last 3 years. We got a chance to talk to him at spring training as well. So I'm biased. Both of these guys are great people, super kind people. And obviously they're very good pitchers. You mentioned it, sort of 2 things. One is it's spring training. We kind of have to set it aside. And the other, with a guy like Michael Grove, the stuff is ticking up. And he said in the interview, hey, I've only really been pitching now for the last couple of years after coming off some major injuries. And yes, it's spring training, but when he touched 97, he was striking out Corbin Carroll on 3 pitches, the same Corbin Carroll who's one of the top prospects in all of baseball, who just signed a $100 million contract. So it's not like they're not racking up these strikeouts in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings of games against, the Yanni Hernandezes of the world. That was a joke for Blake. So no, that was a joke. They're not getting them against, guys that are going to begin the season in high A is what I'm getting at. And so I'm curious for you, Blake. Again, Pepiot is the name brand. He's the guy that has been talked about as a potential starter for a long time. And Grove is kind of this guy that's like, well, he might be the next Mitch White. That's the way he's been talked about. Do you see that as a fair comparison, or do you think that maybe these two guys are closer than some of the prospect lists indicate?
I still think Grove is going to be in like that Mitch White, Russ Stripling kind of swingman role long term. It's encouraging that his stuff is ticking up. And I think with spring training, it's more about like passing the eye test and seeing what they're doing instead of like the stats specifically. And both of them are passing the eye test right now, which is encouraging. But I don't think Grove has that same potential that Pepiot has. Pepiot has one of the best changeups in the minor leagues. It's his carrying pitch. And there's a reason he's been ranked higher by every scout. So there is a difference, but it's encouraging to see Grove have his stuff tick up.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot. Blake, I'll start with you. Which one of these guys do you think starts the season in the rotation?
I would say Pepiot, just because of the upside that he gives you. And they might end up keeping Grove in the bullpen just with a couple guys being hurt. I think Grove is kind of better suited to be in the bullpen right now. So that's kind of how I see it early. And then, as Scott said, they're both going to get a chance.
Yeah. Scott, you think Pepiot sort of gets the ball in the first 5 games?
Yeah, absolutely. First 5 games. I mean, he'll be in the rotation. Absolutely. I certainly believe Pepiot will be the guy, just based off I think he's had like 7 or 8 major league starts, something like that. I think he'll be the guy. He looks ready to go, eye test, but I think he'll play. I think it'll be really, really good year for Ryan Pepiot.
I mean, and again, spring training stats aside, if Pepiot's issue has been control and you see 1 walk in 6 innings, those are the types of things that matter, right? You're not necessarily looking at many other things, but with Pepiot, if there's one number that matters is he controlling the strike zone? So I think that's a positive. I thought it was interesting that Michael Grove, you want to talk about looking into things that probably mean literally nothing, that Michael Grove started the very first game of spring training. Sometimes with the young guys, they don't sort of get them going until later in the spring. And so I don't know if that's an indication that they felt really good about where Michael Grove ended last season and the offseason, or if it was just the first game and they needed a warm body to throw some pitches. I'm not really sure, but I just have a sneaking suspicion that they like Michael Grove a lot more than maybe the prospect community does. And that's not a knock on Pepio. So I'll zag a little bit here and put my prediction on Michael Grove being the guy that gets a start before Ryan Pepio. I'll put it that way. One of the names that we're not mentioning in this conversation quite yet is Bobby Miller. And there's been some interesting news about him coming out of camp. Top pitching prospect in the system, but it's been announced that he's not going to pitch in any spring training games for the Dodgers. Dave Roberts said they are, quote, slow playing him a little bit. Last season, this is a guy who started a game in the Freeway Series right before the regular season. And this year, he's not going to see any competitive major league outings preseason. Blake, I'll come to you. Is this a good idea, the way they're handling Bobby Miller here?
I wouldn't say it's a good idea or a bad idea. I don't think it ultimately matters. Like, he's going to get his innings in the minor leagues and build up. And I think if they're kind of slow playing him, so he'll be ready later in the season and they have that availability there. So I don't think it's a huge deal or something we should read into too much. It's just how they're working out their pitchers.
Yeah, Scott, I should mention this was breaking news from the Dodger Blue 1958 YouTube channel when the three of us got to interview Bobby Miller in spring training. And I asked, hey, are you going to be pitching anytime soon? And he basically said no. And so that was kind of confirmed and clarified a couple weeks later. But I tend to think this is a good thing because we know that all these young guys are going to be on an innings limit. And to me, if I'm Bobby Miller, I take some encouragement out of this in thinking, they want me to be available, to have innings left in the tank come September and October, not at the AAA level, but at the major league level. So I see this as, hey, bud, you're only going to throw, pick a number, 100, 120 innings this year. Let's save those for the second half of the season when we might need you at the major league level.
Yeah, I mean, if there's nothing there, it's just like Blake said. I don't think it's it's the worst idea. It's not a bad idea. This is kind of how they're going about it. We talked about when first it was speculation. We were kind of breaking down what he exactly told us, and if it is that they would like him later on in the year, and the possibility that he doesn't run into an innings limit when they have to limit him, I think it's a good idea right now theoretically if we think about it. But we'll see how it plays out. As long as there's nothing health-wise that's, kind of sparked up and that's the reason why, or there's something they're worried about, then I'm going to trust the Dodgers and how they would like to do that. And just like we saw last year, they really they could have benefited from a few more reliable arms down the stretch. And he's one, just like we talked about, that would play up in October. Big stuff if he's able to step right in, feel comfortable in the majors. And it's not the worst idea.
And to clarify, he indicated both to us and in the follow-up interview that he is healthy. This isn't a health thing. He says he feels great. He feels 100%, feels as good as he's ever felt. And so that's why I just tend to think, great. Like, you've got Pepio, you've got Grove. You don't need him to be the number 5 starter to begin the season. So let him just slowly build up and be ready, because that's a guy that if you want to talk about all of the pitching prospects of who could make an impact in a bullpen late in the season, how about the guy who throws 100 with about 2 other plus pitches? So Miller, I think this is the right decision. We don't need April starts in AAA out of Bobby Miller. We need him available in September and October and hopefully beyond, able to make an impact.
Yeah, it just really makes me think of Walker Buehler.
Yeah. And somebody, I was going to say, there was a comment that basically said, hey, they did the same thing with Walker Buehler. And
yeah, he knows.
Obviously, hopefully we're headed on the same trajectory there. Let's move from Bobby Miller to a different prospect, and that's my guy, James Outman. We're going to talk a little bit about James Outman, who's been fantastic. And I'm going to give you both a scenario. Who wants to go first on this scenario, Scott or Blake? You get to choose.
I'll go.
There you go.
I'll go. Blake likes to react off me, but I'll go.
Okay, Scott, you go first. I'm going to give you an imaginary scenario. I know we like to talk about platoons and we like to talk about lefties, righties. Okay. Let's just simplify this conversation. Right now, give me the best 3 outfielders that the Dodgers have. If you were to put your best, like imagine a scenario where you don't know who's pitching lefty or righty. You've just got to pick your best 3 guys, and you could value offense however you want. You could value defense however you want. You could value positional fit however you want. Give me your 3 best outfielders for the Dodgers right now.
To give you the best 3, or can I give you the one what I think they're going to do with James Outman? I think that's what we're getting.
See, Blake, this is why we should have had you just go first. It's a very simple
I said
question.
I'll
I
go
feel
first.
like, Blake. Yeah, okay, Blake, you go first. This is a simple question.
Okay, well, we're starting with Mookie, obviously.
Yep.
And
Blake's
then I
guy.
think
Blake Sky Mookie's got to be in there.
I'm going Outman. This is my second guy. And then I think Chris Taylor, but it's a toss-up between him and David Peralta. And that's going to come down to a platoon. But like you said, that doesn't matter. So I'm giving Chris Taylor the advantage here.
Okay, so you've got Mookie, your guy Mookie, James Outman, and Chris Taylor are your 3. Scott, now that you understand the exercise a little bit here, you can give me your 3.
Mookie, James Outman, Peralta.
Okay. It's interesting because we all agree on the first 2. I mean, and we could say whatever we want about spring training stats, right? James Outman is destroying baseballs at spring training. Right now, he has a slash line of 291 batting average, a 464 on base, a 783 slug. That's good for a 1.247. He's got 2 homers, a triple, a double, and 8 RBIs. And this is on a guy who is a 60 grade fielder, a 60 grade arm, described by MLB Pipeline as a, quote, plus defender at all 3 outfield positions. He's a left-handed bat, by the way, which the Dodgers don't have very many of. And yet, Dave Roberts, when asked, is he big league ready, said, quote, I would say he is. How we shake it out is a different question. But yeah he's doing everything that he can do. Outman, when we interviewed him, said this: I know there's an opportunity there. I'm focusing on, but focusing on that is not going to get me where I want to be. I'm just trying to stay present, get better, do what I do every day. Real quick, some numbers, spring training stats for the rest of the guys in this competition. Jason Hayward has an 811 OPS with 2 home runs. Peralta, 1 for 14. Blake's guy, Chris Taylor, 3 for 26 with 10 strikeouts. Look, you could say spring training numbers don't matter all you want. 3 for 26 with 10 strikeouts on a guy that had the season he just had. I think that matters. Trace Thompson, 1 for 13 with 5 strikeouts. So let's just set all of that aside. We'll come back to the Outman and where he fits. Scott, I'll come to you. Dave Roberts' comments. Is he MLB ready? Yes. But seemingly indicating what many people have guessed, which is James Outman is not going to begin the season on the major league roster because they don't have the ability to let him play every day there. So even if he is one of the better guys, they're going to let him play every day in AAA. Seems to be what Roberts is saying. Is that what you're hearing? And if so, what are your thoughts?
You know, I've tossed this scenario around to multiple people. I get, people ask me all the time about, James Outman, and they should. This is a young outfielder. When's the last time we let the kids play? Yeah. That's the question and that's what I've kind of, really like to talk about. And we've wanted to see the youth come up and make an impact. And he's one of those guys that by all accounts is ready to go on everything: mentality, plate awareness, zone awareness, which is great. And what's phenomenal is that Harold is a defensive outfielder, bats playing up. How does that happen? That's, the maturation process. But the unfortunate part is that they have a bunch of outfielders that are, David Peralta, Trace Thompson. David Peralta is a lock, but you have Reclamation Project and Jason Hayward. And I don't believe that a guy like him will be, on the bench. That's not, I just don't see that. Defensive replacement for me, it possibly, but James Outman could be just a casualty of having options. And I would like him to get everyday at bats if he's not starting every day in the major leagues. So for me, I want him to if he's in the major leagues, I want him out there every day. I don't want him, spot duty. I don't think anybody would like that. And I think Blake would agree. We've talked about it before, and I think he's on the same page there.
Yeah, so we got a commenter, Roger, saying, so basically they don't believe in James Outman, but I think the key is what you mentioned. Of all the guys I just mentioned, James Outman's the only guy that they can send down to the minor leagues and not lose from the organization. Jason Hayward's technically on a minor league deal. He's going to get added to the 40-man roster, you would imagine. As you said, Peralta's got a $6.5 million contract. He doesn't have anything to worry about. Chris Taylor's got an even bigger contract, and Trace Thompson can't be optioned. And so, Blake, as you navigate that, I mean, it really is that simple. the Dodgers are essentially having a conversation and not asking the question I asked, which are who are our best outfielders, but more so who are the best outfielders and how do we keep the most of them in our organization, even if they're not helping us from day one.
I kind of felt like Dave Roberts' comments were more just coach speak and we're kind of reading too much into it.
Okay.
I think he just didn't want to fully commit to saying like Outman's going to be on the roster because they haven't fully decided yet. And I think as spring training ends, they'll have that conversation because I don't think the roster's fully set. The Lux situation kind of changed some things up. So they can play Chris Taylor in the infield and you can keep an extra outfielder. Like you can keep Jason Hayward as your fourth outfielder and totally be fine with Outman starting there. You get more versatility with Chris Taylor back in the infield. And I think Dave Roberts already talked about Chris Taylor is going to spend more time in the infield after the Lux injury. So I think they were kind of setting up for that. And it's just, I don't think they're going to make a decision just based on the options here because the games do matter early now. They're not the runaway favorites to win the division anymore. So they're going to have to do the things that make the team the best they can. I think it's really just coming down to like they didn't fully decide on who's going to make the roster yet, so they don't want to put anything set in stone.
So Blake, are we worried about Yanni Hernandez's status if Chris Taylor is going to be the backup infielder? Do we have enough room for two of those guys?
If Outman's on the roster, it's going to probably leave Yanni off, but Yanni might have a chance to make it if Outman's in AAA, so we'll see.
You mentioned, Blake, Chris Taylor as a starter. I referenced the 3 for 26 with 10 strikeouts in spring training. I have been on record as saying I'm not confident that we're going to see a Chris Taylor revival here. It sounds like that maybe you're more optimistic than me. Is that fair to say?
I have some optimism in it just because he's been a good player for a few years. And then his struggles came when he was dealing with a neck injury, and that's tough to deal with, especially for a hitter. It's just, there's a lot that goes into hitting, and if your neck isn't right, you're going to struggle. And he's always been a streaky player, so I'm not too concerned about the spring training numbers. It's just about him getting back into a groove and getting hot at the right time again.
Okay, and just Blake, I'll stay with you. Trace Thompson, David Peralta, 1 for 13 and 1 for 14, respectively. Again, I am not like, we're not printing out spring training stats over here. It's just these are the numbers we have to work with. And both of those guys, Trace Thompson probably more than Peralta, had one good year. And that was it. And so when I look at spring training stats, I think they can they don't prove anything, but I think they can kind of nudge you in one direction or another. So Blake, I'll just ask related to Trace, what level of confidence do you have that the Dodgers, I don't think we're going to expect 100% of what we got from Trace last year, but like, do you believe in Trace Thompson, the above average offensive baseball player? Is that what the Dodgers are going to get next season?
I don't really believe in it just because what he did last year at the end of the season, he started struggling a lot. He was striking out a lot. But to bring up the spring training numbers you were talking about, like Trace Thompson and David Peralta went to the World Baseball Classic and they've been carrying the offenses for those teams. So like you can't put any stock into it. Like once the adrenaline gets going, these players start to do better usually. But just based on last year, I don't have much faith in Trace Thompson. I'm just hoping he can figure out how to hit lefties and be a good platoon partner for Peralta.
Yeah, Scott, briefly. I mean, Chris, where are you at on Chris Taylor and Trace Thompson as far as two guys that saw their careers go in the exact opposite direction they had been going the 3 or 4 years prior? Are you buying or selling kind of those guys as above average offensive players in 2023?
I'm still out on Chris Taylor until we see him for, not a significant stretch of time. Just, he's a big rhythm and timing guy, and we just haven't seen him find that in over a year. It's been a bit since, I do agree with Blake with the neck injury. We'll tie into everything. I'm dealing with a shoulder right now, and I couldn't imagine having to be as locked in and, each facet of the game and feel okay with it. But if he's not okay physically, where is he? But if he's okay physically and he still hasn't found that, then there's like a lot of cause for concern. Then it's just a utility guy with a plus glove that can't hit. Yeah, that strikes out a ton. So that's an issue. Trace Thompson, reverse splits guys are really tough to deal with, especially when the rest of the options around there are, so David Peralta, he'll see time against righties. If Trace Thompson doesn't figure out how to hit left-handed pitching, then it's tough to deal with. And they'll need some options there. Once again, for how many years has it been since we haven't had a guy come in and absolutely obliterate left-handed pitching? So somebody has to step up into that role. Trace Thompson won't replicate that same year. But it's great that he's having success in the World Baseball Classic, and hope it carries, fingers crossed.
Well, and when you say reverse splits, keep in mind Trace Thompson was a reverse splits player for the first time in his career last season.
Yeah,
so,
I know.
That's like the weirdest part, is that all of a sudden he became the exact opposite. I think, Blake, you made a point that I want to touch on before we move on from the Outman conversation. The Dodgers are favorites, but they're not heavy favorites. This isn't a season where you can kind of toy around a little bit, knowing that by the time the dust settles, you'll probably be 8 to 10 games up in the division. To me, that matters. Like, to me, they can't make this, like when Gavin Lux goes down, when Tony Gonsolin goes down, the margin for error shrinks. And so if they were fully healthy everywhere else, and you said, you know what, our best outfielder, we're actually going to send him down so we can keep all these other guys around, I can get on board with that to some degree. But when Gavin Lux gets hurt and now you're replacing him with Miguel Rojas, and Tony Gonsolin gets hurt and he's going to get replaced by a relative unknown in either Pepio or Grove, then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute. So you're telling me Trace Thompson or Jason Hayward is going to get way more at bats than James Outman, even though we're all agreeing that James Outman is better offensively and defensively than both of those guys. And yet we're doing that just so that, like, we keep these guys around. I just think, to me, the point you made about the small margins matters. And that's why I think I'm more passionate about, like, if he's the best player, let him play. And I would say also, if they move Chris Taylor to the infield, as you suggested, then they can kind of do both. Let Jason Hayward be the fourth outfielder, let James Outman start, and then Trace Thompson can be the fifth outfielder. Like, you could just carry 5 outfielders out there. Chris Taylor can be your infielder, and make all the rest of those pieces kind of fit together. That would be my approach. Are you and I on, like, you mentioned the small margins, so I picked up on that. Were you thinking along those lines to some degree, Blake, when you said that?
Yeah, that's how I see it. If the Padres were the Padres of old, then it wouldn't matter as much, but now they might be the favorite for the division, depending on what source you're looking at or who you're talking to. So you just can't play around with not fielding the best roster anymore.
Yeah.
Yep.
Scott, you agree?
Totally agree. You start to finish, the schedule changes. There's no longer, the division matchups matter that much more now. Like, you can't coast through division opponents anymore. Everybody watching that doesn't know about the new scheduling and in division opponents should go take a look at that.
Yeah.
I'll comment that on the YouTube and after we're done, and everyone should go take a look. But the in-division matchups now will matter even more. So when they face the Padres, all these things will be that much more hyped. I agree. I agree with Blake. It's you have to field the best roster start to finish.
Yeah. And look, if you're going to tell me, like, I know there's some people that don't believe in the James Outman hype. This is a guy who strikes out a lot. Historically, the hit tool has always been a question, and some people, still believe that. Then I would get, not buying into what we're talking about here. But if you're in the camp of he tweaked his swing, there's a lot of scouts that seem to believe in the offense now, he's going to give you positive defense, then I think it becomes a more interesting conversation. So we'll see. Speaking of, I was going to transition this and make a joke about, like, Kershaw struggling and feed all the trolls who just want to talk about how this guy is a bum and how he's washed, but I couldn't think of something quick enough on the fly. So let's talk about Clayton Kershaw. He makes his first spring training start. And Scott, what do you know? He gets absolutely shelled. 3 earned runs. What are we going to do with this guy?
What are we going to do? DFA him? No, I couldn't care less. I'd find a rhythm. Dodgers even said once he wasn't committed or, wasn't with WBC, they were going to slow him down. So this is literal first action for Kershaw. Everyone needs to take a breath. It's okay.
Yeah. Scott, Blake, we used to have a segment on here called Big Deal or No Deal. And I would put this on a scale of 1 to 10. I think this is a 0.1 on the panic meter in Jeff's world. Are you taking the over under on 0.1 panic on your panic?
I'm full panic. I'm a 10 here.
Oh my goodness.
10 out of 10. Jeez, hates Mookie and panic on Kershaw.
In all seriousness, there's nothing to worry about. Players are working on things in spring training. They're just building up. not much you should take away from that start at all.
What you should take away is how funny it is that he tried out the thing where you start calling your own pitches, the pitch comm, because now the pitcher has the option to wear it on his own belt. There's a great video of Zach Greinke calling a pitch and then shaking himself off, which is a great
Love
moment.
it.
But basically, Kershaw tried it for the first time and realized it was way too much work to like be trying to punch in his own pitches and then deal with everything else. So he just gave up. I think that was my favorite part of this start. But yeah, Kershaw, he'll be fine. I just laugh at the people who say he's washed. It's like, you can say that he gets injured more frequently. Sure. Whenever he pitches, he is one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball by just about every metric out there. And so regardless of where you stand on the health piece, when Kershaw is healthy, like how injury prone he is, but when he is healthy, he's absolutely fantastic. So
his velocity ticked up.
There you go. There you go. What's not to love? What's not to love? All right. Well, let's talk one more thing before we get to some questions here, get to some World Baseball Classic stuff. Let's talk about the pace of play stuff. I know this was the biggest talking point. I laughed when the three of us were at spring training because every single time a guy got in front of a camera, like the second question they got asked was, "Hey, pitcher, what do you think about the pitch clock?" You know, and it's just like, these guys have to be so sick of answering these questions. But I thought Jeff Passan had a great sort of summary tweet. These numbers are a few days old, but I can't imagine this has changed much. But because of the shift change, because of the pitch clock, and because of the bases, these are the results so far. The time of game is down 26 minutes, 26 minutes shorter. Runs per game have gone from 10.6 to 11. Steals are up 50%. Batting average on balls in play are up 23% on ground balls. And the strikeout rate is a tick down of 1%. So you've got shorter games, more runs, more steals, more hits, and less strikeouts. Blake, what's there not to like about this stuff?
Yeah, we talked about it in Arizona on our last live show. I'm a fan. I love it. I think a lot of people are going to grow to love it too if they don't already love it. It just makes the game more exciting. There's a nice pace to it. You don't have to sit there watching a pitcher stare at the dirt for a minute before he throws his next pitch. It's just more fun, more offense, and you don't need to watch a 3-hour game before you go to bed and have to work the next day or do whatever. So yeah. I think it's just good all around.
Scott, any complaints? You going to be the get off my lawn guy?
Oh, no, man. There's been a few over the years that you've had to adapt to, but I knew that, like, how many stories we've had to write about pitch clock in the minor leagues, and you see how much it affected there. And knowing that it was going to, once Rob Manfred got his ultimate dream into big league baseball, it's hard not to like it. And watching WBC games, and you're looking at the clock saying it's still in the third inning. So it's mind blowing. So I like the pace. It definitely will change the fan experience going to the game, and I've thought about that. And I remember we talked about concessions, sales, and then that became a topic I saw flying around on Twitter like crazy. So I'm excited to see how that happens and what the response is to that. If they can't keep selling alcohol past the seventh inning, doesn't work like that. Sorry, but I do like the pace of play. It's exciting to watch. I feel like pitchers, you saw Julio working quite fast, like he was on the pitch clock. So I think players will adapt fairly quick. Fans will too, and the numbers all back it up. More steals, we want it. That's some old school part of the game that even the get off my lawn guys can get behind, right?
It's like, I don't know what you could possibly not like. It's like the people that have an issue with the pitch clock that want these games to be 3 hours instead of 2.5 hours. I just, how somebody could not understand and appreciate the fact that baseball needs to grow the number of people watching it in order for it to survive and thrive long term. And then for them to connect that to the game is going to be far more accessible and far more enjoyable to the non-hardcore, like AL only 52-person team fantasy baseball guy. It's beyond me. The game is shorter. There are more runs, there are more hits, and there are less strikeouts. Every single change that has happened, Blake, is a good thing. And so, I don't know. We're all in agreement here, so we don't need to belabor this point. I just, to me, it's like, I don't understand. Like, you will get used to all of it, and after 2 weeks, you will just not even notice it, and all those things will still be better.
I think there's one more important point to make here. It's not like they shorten the games by making them 7 innings.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
still getting the same amount of baseball. It's just happening quicker. They're cutting out the time of just players standing around doing nothing. And that's going to make it way more fun to watch. And I really think it's going to grow on pretty much everyone.
So somebody in the comments is making the point that at the World Baseball Classic, they're not playing with any of these rules. And I know you guys have been far more engaged on the World Baseball Classic than I have. So Blake, like, the World Baseball Classic has something that Major League Baseball games do not, which is like sort of the World Cup vibe of people rooting for their country and the energy and the excitement in the crowd. So I think that's going to cover up a lot of warts. But when you watch, look, there's outliers. What was it? The Canada game? It was like 2.5 hours through 4 innings or something like that. But Blake, have you noticed a dramatic difference between World Baseball Classic games and Major League Baseball games?
I think it does feel like a little more tedious going along in the game. It's just slower pace. It's like baseball has been. So we all kind of know how baseball has been.
Yeah.
It's more you have to compare it to how spring training feels. So I do think spring training feels more fun and just more exciting pace-wise. So
yeah,
there is a difference, and you can tell.
I think you make the point with the innings thing, Blake, which is baseball did all of these things without changing the sport. You know, like everybody was so freaked out that they were going to change the essence of what made baseball great. And they simply haven't. They haven't. It's still 27 outs. It's still all of the things you like. It's just things that are going to improve the experience for fans. And I don't know. Again, to me, it's a no-brainer. Scott, anything you want to add there before we move on to the World Baseball Classic and some questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Games in the old days went quite fast. Now it's just saying now they know the game started taking way too long. There's too much time standing around. Get on with it. We love baseball. This isn't an anti-baseball thing. No. This is that there's just so much, dead time. Now, if you're at the game and you go on your phone, you're going to miss a whole at bat.
Yeah.
So you need to be, that's it. So it's engaging. It will bring more eyes for me. People lose interest when throw a pitch, Pedro Baez, I can run a lap around my block and the count's still 1-0.
Yeah.
So it's going to cut out that whole dead time. And it's great.
Yeah. It's a great point that baseball is in a way going back to the way that it used to be. They just didn't need to enforce these rules. Guys just knew that like, hey, I should just get the baseball and throw another pitch pretty quickly. And so now we're just sort of creating rules to say, hey, let's go back to the way that baseball was originally played. All right, I'm going to give both of you guys a minute or two to talk about the World Baseball Classic. I have joked with you. I've joked on Twitter. When the World Baseball Classic was in LA and Anaheim, 2008, 2009-ish, I went to all the games. I've said it before. The panoramic picture behind me was a picture I took at Dodger Stadium at a World Baseball Classic game. So I've had moments where I've enjoyed it. Maybe it's just the time of year. I don't know what it is. It doesn't move the needle. Maybe I just have too many other things going on in my life right now. It doesn't move the needle. So I have watched exactly 0 minutes of World Baseball Classic. Blake, you think I'm a crazy person for saying I'd rather watch James Outman take spring training at bats than watch the U.S. get stomped by Mexico. So I'll give you the floor, Blake, and then Scott, you can pick it up from him.
Yeah, I think Scott made that point about Outman, But yeah, the World Baseball Classic, I just think it's a whole lot of fun. The players get into it. The fans get into it. It's just a great atmosphere. If you've been following me on Twitter or Instagram, you can see I've been posting a lot of the highlights and stuff, and it's just a lot of fun. It's the best way I can describe it.
That's awesome. So, Scott, you're in the same boat.
It's great. The World Baseball Classic, it's been 6 years since World Baseball Classic baseball. And you're telling me that if you haven't watched, you're doing yourself a disservice. Like watching Jose Quijada, rip his jersey off after, big at bat. It's unbelievable. If that doesn't fire you up, I don't know what about baseball would. It's been fantastic.
Watching the Dodgers gets me fired up. Not watching
just
Nick
spring
Martinez,
training baseball.
Kendall Graveman, Brady Singer, Adam Ottavino, and Aaron Loop throw pitches in a Team USA jersey. It feels like the Olympics.
Watch other games. Don't just watch Team USA. There's been so much good baseball. The storylines are amazing. Like oh my gosh, stop! Don't do this.
The Czech Republic team of all amateurs.
Yeah, man, that's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
What about the 40-year-old guy from Israel? It's a great story. I mean, look, I'm not anti you're all idiots for watching it. I just have openly said, because I'm on multiple, I'm on my text with my brother and my cousin. They all both think I'm idiots too. They think I'm an idiot too. And it's fine. like we all like different things. And I could sit here and say like, hey, F1's awesome. You should all watch F1. And some people are going to like it and some people aren't. And, don't tell me this is like the World Cup. It's not like the World Cup. It's similar. It's,
Why
I
not?
love the Olympic. Well, because it's not like the most important sporting event in the world and hasn't been for the last 100 years. So, I mean, other than that, I guess it's sort of similar to the World Cup. Like it's more similar to like Olympics type stuff. But like when the Olympics happen and baseball's in the Olympics, nobody cares. Right? Like, Blake, do you watch the Olympics? Like when Team USA is playing in the Olympics and Tommy Lasorda used to manage those groups? Like,
I wasn't a baseball fan. I don't know when the last time they played in the Olympics was, but I just think the World Baseball Classic is baseball at its best. You get the pure emotion from players.
Thank you.
You get the fans just having a blast in the stands, playing instruments and waving flags and having every noisemaker imaginable. It's a fun atmosphere, and all the players really buy into it. And it's the best form of baseball you can have. And it's going to be even better when they have the pitch clock.
And again, I'm not anti the WBC. I just don't. To me, it's not personally interesting. I mean, and so somebody points out that half of Japan's population has watched the games, and that, like, to me, in some ways makes sense because in that way, I think the American experience of watching the World Cup is probably similar to the way a lot of like a country like Japan watches baseball. And what I mean by that is Japan has an incredible baseball professional league there, the NPB, is that right? NBP. But it's like, I think we get spoiled because the greatest baseball players in the world play in the United States consistently. Whereas when we're watching soccer matches, like I help out with the local MLS team in Portland, the Timbers. I was at the game last night and I would joke with people. It's like if you were to go to a Portland Trailblazers game, you're going to see, a bunch of the top 100 basketball players in the world. If you go to an MLS game in the United States, you're not going to see anybody who's in the top 500 players in the world at any point. And so when you get to see the US compete against other countries, I think there's something special about it. In baseball, I don't know. It's just a different experience because in many ways, I just read off the pitching lineup for the United States. I'll see better pitching in a Dodgers game a month from now than I will in the United States team. And that's just me. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy that anyways. And some people enjoy watching a team full of amateurs compete. That's great. I've got enough other things going on that, again, I'm not crapping on the WBC. I feel like this is coming across as it sucks. You're all idiots
time
for watching it. That's fine. I mean, if people can't listen to me say I don't like something and take it personally and be offended by me saying I don't want to watch something, then that's a them problem. That's not a me problem. That's how I see it. So enjoy the World Baseball Classic. I'm glad people are enjoying it. I don't understand the judgment I get for not caring. So anyways.
But you are bringing up the pitching, but now read off their lineup for Team USA. It's fun seeing all the best hitters in the world playing on the same lineup.
Yeah, your guy Mookie, bat and leadoff. But I agree. And I mean, the Dominican lineup, I remember when it came out, and it's ridiculous as well. So, yeah, it's good. Unfortunately, that U.S. lineup is having a rough one tonight, 4 for 25. But Betts, Trout, Goldschmidt, Arenado, Alonso, Tucker, Anderson, the janitor, who, by the way, can we talk about who's got one of the only hits for Team USA? It's my guy. Home run, bottom 7th. No big deal. I mean, no big deal. So it's just, what are you going to do?
If Will Smith can't get you to watch Team USA, is there anything that will get you to watch it?
Well, somebody told me that Austin Barnes stole a base off of Will Smith today. So I'm going to blame the pitcher. I don't even know who was on the mound. Didn't see it happen, but had to be a slow move. Had to be a slow move to the plate, I think. So, all right, let's change the subject here. Let's get to some questions. If you've got some questions, throw them in the chat. Again, thanks for those joining us live. And thanks for those listening afterwards on the podcast. If you ever want to get some questions answered, but no, you can't be here, find me on Twitter at Jeff Spiegel. Feel free to send me a message. I've got one that I'll start with while the chat starts populating. This is from Henry Ruiz. He said, hey, Jeff, should the Dodgers make a big trade so that a few of these talent actually get a chance to play in the big leagues? Will they do anything with Andy Pages, Michael Busch, Andre Jackson, James Outman, etc.? So he's pointing out the Dodgers have some talent in guys like Michael Busch, Andre Jackson. He mentions Pages. I think Pages is not being suppressed by the Dodgers. I think he's just still a little bit away, but I think Michael Busch is maybe the perfect example. So Scott, I'll come to you first. Should the Dodgers be moving a guy like Michael Busch, who is definitely ready offensively to be playing at the major league level and yet doesn't have a path in Los Angeles?
I mean, Blake, who's the guy? Who do we trade for you, Darvish? What was that again?
Willie Calhoun.
Second base.
Oh yeah,
Willie Calhoun. Thank you. It's Michael Busch this is a Willie Calhoun situation all over again. The dude projects as a big league hitter and he just doesn't have a spot. Shout out Michael Busch, proving us all wrong. Sorry, Michael Busch. I'm looking in the camera. You tanked that one and I'm sorry. So sure, but it's about what other organizations value. And just because they're having success in spring training doesn't mean they're like instantly, trade for them. They're going to replicate this. That's just not how it goes. And the Dodgers aren't going to deal. You don't force trades. Andrew Friedman won't do that. You roster and organizational depth matters, and having these guys is there because on the surface, you project them to play for your team. But if it comes up that they would be of value in a trade, sure. But you don't just do it because you need to force a trade. Let's wait till midseason, see if the opportunities are out there, and then go from there.
Yeah. And Blake, that was kind of my response was, hey, it sucks for Michael Busch, but that's just the way the system works. Like, why would the Dodgers trade a guy that they can stash in AAA in case of emergency just because it's a bummer for him? And that sounds harsh when you say it, but that's just the nature of the sport. The Dodgers can hang on to Michael Busch. It costs them nothing. They can camp him in the minor leagues. And if JD Martinez doesn't pan out, if Max Muncy or Freddie Freeman gets hurt, like there are options of ways that those guys can come up. And so I just look at this as, if they could get value for Michael Busch, they probably will. But at the same time, there's no reason to trade them because they're not in the philanthropy business of saying, let's do what's best for Michael Busch. They're trying to do what's best for the Dodgers.
Yeah, I think Michael Busch could also be kind of their more long-term option at DH. JD Martinez is on a 1-year deal, and if he does continue to regress, he could be a plug-and-play option there. And it just is valuable to keep him around. He's not going to play great defense at any position, but he can maybe handle left field. He can maybe handle second base. He can maybe handle first base. So it's just a nice option to have, especially when their position player group isn't the deepest it's been.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to force a trade. And I think he still has a path to playing. It's just not a clear one.
Well, so Michael asks, who is JD Martinez's replacement as a DH if he's a bust? Blake, is Michael Busch the answer here?
I want to say yes, but I feel like they'd probably just get the outfielders more playing time, mix in Peralta and Trace there. If that doesn't pan out, then you might be looking at Busch. They're just going to go with who the best hitter is, and they might just end up like kind of going with a platoon for the DH role like they did last year. So I don't think there's any real replacement. It's just how everything's going at the time.
Scott, do you agree with that assessment answering this question?
Yeah, without a doubt. This is where the platoon splits come in with guys like Eddie Peralta, play guys who don't play premier defense. You find a spot for them, and man, if JD Martinez is a bust, that's a tough one to really bank with. Yeah.
Okay. Jason asks, I'm looking for a comment on who's going to be the Dodgers comeback player of the year. Is it Daniel Hudson, Chris Taylor, Jimmy Nelson, Max Muncy, other names that he mentions here? I'll take the low-hanging fruit and the easy answer here. I believe in Max Muncy. I think he's going to figure it out and be fine. I'm on the opposite end of the argument from Chris Taylor. So, I guess Muncy technically qualifies. He feels like the easy answer, but I would go with Max Muncy. Scott, you have a choice here for a comeback player of the year for the Dodgers.
Is Daniel Hudson we put them in that category, tearing an ACL?
He missed most of the year.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Pitcher.
And I guess he's going to miss the beginning of the season too, as well, right?
Sure. Yeah. Huddy, that's my guy. Love him.
Okay. Blake?
I'm very confident in Max Muncy rebounding. I think I said it in the last show, so he's going to be my guy. I have some belief in Chris Taylor still, as I mentioned. Jimmy Nelson was great the last time, so he could be a guy too, but Muncy is the easy answer, and I think a lot of people are confident in him rebounding.
Yeah. Okay. THP asks, who do you think has the most success out of the bullpen besides Evan Phillips? JP Fireeisen, I know you both like him, but he's not an option here because we don't know what his situation is. So, Blake, I'll go to you first. You love relievers and have immense confidence in all of them at all times. That's a joke. Blake feels confidence in no relievers ever. Besides Evan Phillips, who do you think has the most success in the Dodgers pen?
I think Daniel Hudson ends up taking over as their primary closer, like not their set every time out they have a lead closer, but I think he's going to get the majority of saves when he's healthy. So I'm going to go with him.
Scott?
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Hudson was incredible last year when he stepped into the closer role. Alex Vesia is another name that I'd really like to keep out there. He's been incredible. He's been, that's a developmental piece that I would really like to see him take another step. And he's just so fun to watch pitch. I'd really like it to be Vesia.
Yeah, there's options here. Yency Almonte, another guy who was great. And then you could go to sort of the projects. Alex Reyes could be a name that fits into this conversation. Shelby Miller, if you want to believe in some of that energy as well. I think Hudson and Vesia, the two names you mentioned, feel good. I just think Almonte probably belongs in that conversation. So just for the sake of rounding it out, I'll throw him. But I would guess one of those three guys. If we're talking about the guys who are healthy, obviously Blake Trinan, if he comes back, Fire Eyes, and if he comes back, there's some other names that are very, very good. But I think those are options. Michael asks, can we fire Dave Roberts this year? That's a big fat no from me. Scott, Dave Roberts get to keep his job as manager in 2024?
Yeah, I don't, unless he puts Kershaw in relief against Juan Soto, in the playoffs and gives up a home run. Knock on wood. Then I think he keeps his job. They just won 111 games. Yeah.
If Dave Roberts didn't get fired after their postseason performance and having no energy and just a total letdown, I think his job security is pretty safe moving forward, no matter what happens. But I'll also say Dave Roberts is a good manager. I'm saying that flat out. He is a good manager.
Yeah.
He's not going to make every perfect decision, but no manager is. If you go watch any manager in baseball, they're going to make decisions you don't like. And part of that is because they have to deal with managing 162 games and making sure they have pitchers healthy and ready to get through that season. And a lot of it is on the players to perform too. But overall, players like playing for Dave Roberts. He's going to manage an okay game at least. It's not going to be perfect, but like I said, no one is. And players just like him. So he's a good manager to have around. And that's why he has some of the best job security in baseball.
Yeah. Okay, let's end with this one. David asks, who's the rookie of the year for the Dodgers? Obviously, Miguel Vargas is an option. I believe one of you will definitely be answering with him. James Outman is an option. I believe one of the three of us will definitely be answering with him. And then you could throw some of the pitching guys in there. Grove, Pepio, Bobby Miller, Gavin Stone as well. Blake, I'll come to you first because I think you're the only person I'm not entirely positive what they're going to say in response to this question. But I'll let you go first.
Well, I'm going to give the same answer as Scott. It's going to be Miguel Vargas. I've been on his hype train since 2020, 2021. I think he's a star in the making. His hit tool is legit. He's an exciting player. He brings energy. He's just the ultimate package.
Yeah, I mean, look, spring training, yada, yada, yada. Defensively, he's been fine, which I think is like kind of, he makes some good plays. He's missed a couple sort of routine plays. Like, I just think he doesn't have to be the greatest defensive second baseman in history, right? Are you buying the defense that you've seen in spring training?
I think he's worked on it enough where he's going to be passable. He's very athletic, so I think that's helping him a lot. And he's always had defensive concerns, but he's been working on it a lot. And Dave Roberts has talked about how much he's worked on it. And he's worked with Miguel Rojas. He's been working with the coaches. So he's putting in the effort. He clearly wants to be a better defender. So I think it's going to pay off. And then another point I didn't mention is he already has a starting spot penciled in. He's the only rookie on the team with that. So I think that's going to help him if we're talking about like who's going to win the Rookie of the Year award. Like it's got to be the guy who's penciled into play.
Yeah. Scott, I know you're going to say the same thing. That was a layup for you. Anything you would add to what Blake just said?
As the Dodger Blue resident Miguel Vargas aficionado, I couldn't think of any better player to have mentoring Miggy V than Mookie Betts. And that's, Juan Toribio had a fantastic thing in his newsletter. And it was that Mookie Betts and Miguel Vargas working together, I think is just such a great pairing. And it's exactly what Mookie's here to do. And to be, Blake's just think I'm trolling with this, but I think he's exactly who the Dodgers need out of a rookie, plus hit tool. He's been putting in the work with veteran players in the offseason leading up to the year. And I'll give Blake credit. Blake's been on Miggy V for longer than I. But it's just, he's somebody that everyone should really grab a hold of and root for, because Miguel Vargas is, by all accounts, is the real deal. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have him starting out there and that the Dodgers believe in him as a rookie.
Would either of your answers, I think I know Scott's here. Blake, would your answer change if James Outman, if you knew he was going to play 125 games in center field for the Dodgers?
No, I don't think so. I think Miguel Vargas is more talented, and I just really like his bat a lot. I think
Yeah.
Outman has the strikeout concern, but Vargas doesn't. His biggest concern with hitting is how his power is going to develop, but I think he can still be like a 20 homer guy still. And if you're hitting 290 with 20 homers, that's going to play.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly it. Like Outman has way more potential in the power department and then obviously defensively. I think the answer is going to be Vargas. I mean, he, as you said, Blake, he's going to get the most opportunities. Even if Outman is on the opening day roster, like he's not going to be an everyday player in the way that Miguel Vargas is. And, but I include Outman in the conversation because I really do think the overall impact that he's going to be able to make on the team once he gets consistent at bats and consistent innings in center field is going to be significant. Like, I think he's going to be a really good defender in center field. I'm not saying he's going to be Cody Bellinger, but I think he's going to be really good out there. He's not going to be a liability. He's actually going to be a plus. And so if you can play a premium position like center field in a plus defensive way, and then, hit 250 with 25 home runs, I think that package becomes incredibly valuable. So I think the answer is Vargas is the easy answer and the most obvious answer. That would be the minus 250 in Vegas if we were picking here. But I would say there could be some value in Outman if he makes the opening day roster and the team sort of commits to letting him play a bit. So there you go. Bruce did ask one question, and we'll end with this one. Will the Dodgers win the World Series in 2023? Blake?
I'm going to say no, just because of the odds are against them and the postseason's so random. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think they can win it, but I'm playing the odds here.
Okay, Scott?
I'm going to pull the answer that Dave Roberts did, or that he said to us when we were by the bullpen. I'm not answering that question. I'm just going to avoid that, plead the fifth at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. I think there's a group of teams that could make a compelling case for being World Series favorites every year, and I think the Dodgers are in that category. I think the World Series, the baseball playoff system, does not reward the best teams, and so, do I think they will make the playoffs? Yes. Do I think they'll be one of the best teams in the playoffs? Yes. Do I think they have a good enough roster, and they will have a good enough roster come post-trade deadline to win the World Series? Yes. Do I think they're actually going to be the one team that gets there? Like they won 50 more games than the Phillies did last year, and the Phillies won the National League. So sometimes with baseball, it's random, and trying to predict how that's going to play out is another thing. But it's like, I'm saying no on one hand, because the odds are, as Blake said, way against them. And on the other hand, I don't want that to be interpreted as they suck and they're not good enough, because I agree with what Blake said in that they absolutely could win and have as much of a claim to winning as I think anybody else. So there you go. Scott, I'm going to circle back. I need an answer. Yes or no? Yeah, I'm in charge of this show, Scott. I'm in charge of this show. You don't get to, you try and avoid my first question. You can't handle a pick 3 outfielders question. Now you can't handle a yes or no question.
Not doing it. I'm not getting memed.
No. N-O were the first 2 letters out of his mouth on that one. So Scott says the Dodgers are not winning the World Series. So
Scott doesn't even think they're going to make the playoffs. That's what he's answering here.
That's what I heard. That's what I heard. Folks, we appreciate you joining us. Blake, Scott, thank you as always. We appreciate you. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. Please ring the notification bell. We have tons of content coming with the season just a couple of weeks away. We'd love to have you along the ride with us. If you're a podcast person, check us out. Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get it. Look for DodgerHeads. Please follow, subscribe, rate, review. That does a great service to us. And of course, check out these guys' work and many of our other writers at DodgerBlue.com. Tons of great content there as well. Enjoy the rest of your night. And as always, go Dodgers.